Good morning. Morning. Come on. Yeah, wake me up. Wake me up, please. Thank you for joining this session called JavaScript Architecture Turning Pain into Gain. My name is Vjekoslav Babić, also known as Vjeko. I've been active in this community for quite a long time. This is my 6th time at TechDays, and I'm really glad that this time my session is not called a black belt session. So far, all of my sessions, or nearly all of them, have been called black belt this or that. However, me being a black belt guy, I couldn't just, not do a black belt thing. So there will be, even though session is not really black belt, I will have to do some crazy things. Okay, calm down. Okay, good. You know those numbers, session numbers, 2, 3, 400? Who does? Okay. So this session has actually was originally planned to be level 300, which means technical. And then discussing with Luke and everything, we decided to make it level 400. And then since I'm at level 400 already, what does it take to get it to level 404? So this means that I'm probably going to lose you somewhere along the way. Actually, I'm probably going to lose myself. So let's try to see how far we get without going crazy. If we would have to make a comparison between CAL as a language and JavaScript as a language, this would be CAL, very serious, very official, very few things it can do, and it doesn't ever do anything that it wasn't supposed to do. And JavaScript will be this. Crazy guy, like doing whatever you want it to do, so it will turn around, do absolutely anything, and will not complain, mostly. So that's the guy that we need to live with. These two guys do not cohabitate well. You can imagine that. They kind of do not really like each other. But since we have to do control add-ins, then I believe we need to find a way to somehow reconcile them. I assume that all of you here are really because of control add-ins, right? That the reason that you are here is not because this session sucks, but the other sucks more, so let us be here. Okay. Well, hopefully it's not that. So let me see who does control add-ins. Okay, good. So there will be fewer of you by the end of the session. Okay, so the session is called architecture. Why architecture? Like, what does it even mean, architecture, when we talk about control add-ins? This is a control add-in, right? Like a small piece of screen where you put something like a colored field or a button or whatever. What is architecture? What does architecture have to do with it? Well, if you think of this, then absolutely nothing. Then you're good to go. You can leave and just join Soren's session. However, if your users spend their day in something that looks like this, or maybe like this, or this, or this, or this, or this, or any of those zillion things which consume entire screen and do many more things than just showing a couple of values in different colors, and if for your users doing their work in this or that doesn't make much sense, then we absolutely do have to talk about architectures. Because with JavaScript, architectures are intrinsically very difficult when communicating with a language which is as rigid as CAL. And we will see what kind of problems we can encounter and how we can solve those problems. Because if we do not pay attention on architectures, then our JavaScript code and our CL code that talks to it will probably look something like that. So I assume this is not the kind of architecture you would like to have in your solution. Trust me, most of JavaScript things I've seen look like that. Imagine for a second that your users do have to spend their day in a full screen thing that consumes entire attention of them and entire screen or better part of it, and provide some different user experience to them rather than lists and pages and role centers that they are used to. So Can you imagine that? Did you? Okay. What do we need to achieve that? We need two things, right? First thing is a page, obviously, a page object. And it shouldn't be more complicated than that, actually. You know? This is as complicated as it will probably get. And the second thing we need is code. Actually, we need a lot of code, more. Yeah, we need a heckload of code. The problem is, you know, these two guys, the left and the right guy, do not really coexist well either. Code should not live in pages. Code has nothing to do in pages. Perhaps something like this does belong in a page. Okay, I'm overreacting, you know. This is not the only thing you will ever want to put in a page. The kind of code that should belong in pages is user interface code that you cannot possibly put anywhere else because it wouldn't work anymore, or some infrastructure code which helps connect page UI logic with the business logic. But business logic itself has nothing to do inside of pages. And this is the first obstacle that we will find. There are many, many more obstacles. JavaScript as a language is completely isolated from CAL. When you make a call to JavaScript, it's asynchronous from the perspective of CAL. And the opposite is also true. When you call from JavaScript into CAL, CAL seems to be asynchronous. Even though both of them are perfectly synchronous, JavaScript is synchronous as well, even though it doesn't look that way. Both of them perceive each other as completely asynchronous, which means you cannot make blocking calls from one to another. It means you can only do ping pong, like send a request and then wait for response, which influences how you write your code tremendously, because your code cannot be done the old way. If you attempt to do the old school code, the way you have been doing CAL only inside of especially classic client, and then of course also role-tailored client, it will be just huge mess of spaghetti that will be very, very difficult to disentangle. So I will be showing a lot of examples here. I will be using Visual Studio, and all of the demos that I will show will be done using the template which you can download from my blog. The template simplifies building of control add-ins, so it builds the control add-in, zips the resource file, creates the control add-in inside of NAV, uploads the resource file, and if you have multiple different control add-ins, it will do the same for all of them. It will also create the folder structure and the manifest file for you. So it's a very useful thing. If I don't see 600 downloads by the end of the day, I will be disappointed. So go. There will be two parts. I will be optimizing two things. I will be optimizing the framework, which is a fancy word. I will explain what I mean by framework. And second thing is I will be optimizing the backend. So let's talk a little bit about optimizing the framework. Click. Let's start with a problem statement. Control add-ins tend to get heavy and tend to cause performance issues. Maybe not big performance issues, maybe tiny performance issues, but the slower the internet or the slower the device that you run that on, you will perceive them more. They are also rigid because you have to write a C# interface or Visual Basic.NET interface that defines the functionality. And CAL is tightly bound to that definition, which means if you change anything in the definition, like you come up with maybe a new event from JavaScript to publish in CAL, or a new method in JavaScript that CAL can call into, then you will have to change this assembly and then deploy it to development environment, then refresh it, which means losing all of the event code, which is painful. And I like to avoid those things. But first, let me prove this, what I've just said. Even the simplest control add-ins can be fat and ugly. So let's take a look at the first demo of today. I will just go here into my universal client. I will click this TechDays 16 icon, and here it is. That's my control add-in. Very fancy, right? Does nothing, right? The only thing it does, it shows two pictures, it prints some text. Let's take a look at the code actually. So here I have my script. I have jQuery, of course. Most of control add-ins will use jQuery. Microsoft uses jQuery, so it makes sense. And here I have some very simple code. So I append some HTML when the document is ready, and blah, blah, blah. So not much. But if you take a look into the folder, if I open it and take a look at this, this resource file is 374 kilobytes big. Why does this matter? It matters for several reasons. First, every single time the control is loaded, even if it's done multiple times per one page, it will be copied from the server to the client, extracted from the server on the client, actually client being ASP.NET, and then loaded in a separate instance of an iframe. So it's a lot of infrastructure work every time that you use a control add-in. It refreshes them all the time. So even if you don't change it, it will send it again. And 374 kilobytes might not seem that much, but trust me, in the world of internet it is. And especially if you want to do some fast showing or opening like pop-ups or something like that, depending on what exactly this control add-in does, it may take quite some time. I've fought with a solution once which actually spent 1 second and maybe one and a half every time it needs to open up. And it didn't seem that much in the beginning, but turned out to be extremely slow in the end and was annoying the customer. So things like that get annoying. So what I want to do first is I want to reduce the size of this control add-in, because you'd see it does nothing, absolutely nothing, and still it is 300 kilobytes in size, which is 300 kilobytes larger than it should be. My first step will be to turn this control add-in into a framework. The biggest problem with this control add-in, it has specific methods. We can take a look at that. If I go into my control add-in definition here and open this iControl add-in file, I will see that I have some methods and some events inside. And if I think of some other method or some other event, I would have to put it there, recompile, redeploy, refresh the page, lose all the code, put all the code back. It will be too much time, too much hassle for nothing. So what I want to do is I want to fix that. I want to enable myself to have more generic thing. Also, I want to move the code from the page to the code unit. Let's take a look at the page. So this is my page. This one. No. This one. Oops. Was it? Apparently not. So I will just show this one. It has quite some code in there. I'm losing time, so let me not fiddle too much. I want to move all the code from the page into the code unit. Actually, yeah, we'll see that later. Also, what I want to do is I want to enable event-based communication, because it's much better. It is more efficient than tightly bound communication. And also, I want to move scripts and styles and images away from my control add-in. I don't want to have that in there. So let me try to make a generic control add-in. The first thing, I will go into my demo here, and I will delete all the contents of my control add-in. And I will just copy demo 2. And let's take a look. So I will first rebuild this solution and then take a look at the size. What's going on? Yeah, it's now 31 kilobytes, so it's much smaller than it used to be. Why is it 31 kilobytes? Because, okay, it doesn't have images embedded. I don't need them. Then my scripts are still in there, my style sheets are still in there, but at least I've dropped images. Also, if I open this code, now I have some HTML code, I have some more logic inside, and if I go to my page, let's take a look at what I have in there. I have a tightly coupled code inside of in my page object. but it's at least lean because the entire architecture of this control is imagined that I only have control ready event to let me know when the control is ready. I have control event, which is any kind of event that control passes on to me. And I have these two events that I will explain later on. So I have added them as I went on. And then what happens is when you run this page, control engine will do something on its own, and then it will fire this start event. Let me see how does it fire this start event. Simply here inside of this code, sorry, not start event, it was the control ready event. When my document loads, it will fire the control ready event. Then my page will do whatever preparation it needs to do. It will call the start code unit, which does some initialization and calls method start. It is a generic way of calling any kind of method inside JavaScript. And then my JavaScript has this switch statement, which receives whichever arguments I want to pass to it and handles that. This is just the first step in the optimization. I hate this, but I have to show it so that we can easily build up a more robust solution. So when this start hits, what happens is that this jQuery that produced this HTML will be appended to the page actually, and I will bind an event so that when I click an event, something happens and another event is fired in NAV, and the event that will be fired in NAV is submit event, and when I go back to NAV, there is only one event, control event, and here I check what was the event that was fired. If I have an architecture such as that, I can easily change just the JavaScript. And remember, JavaScript can come from internet. You can easily deploy a new version. And new version can have new functionality in there. And that new functionality can call into CAL, and CAL can accept that new functionality without you ever having to touch the interface or the CAL structure of the object. So the events are the same, which is what is important. So let's run this simple page. So I will go to Internet Explorer. I will run demo 2. And here's my page. This is what the jQuery does. So I will just put Vjeko, Babić, and then send to NAV. What happens in NAV is that it tells me data from JavaScript, first name, last name, and this is in fact the results of this function here. So I have received data as JSON. I have this interesting JSON management code unit, which I use to parse JSON for me and construct JSON for me so that when I need to pass data back and forth, I don't need to spend too much time on that. So this is a very simple improvement, which now keeps a solid structure of my controller in that I never ever will want to change. So structurally speaking, this is the last version of control-in, at least. Not CL code, not JavaScript code, but the interface that sits in between. Okay. However, as I said, this is of course not the last version. This is what's happening here? Oh, this is trying to find a slide. There is another problem here. There is business logic which is blended with the UI logic. This submit method that was passed, it was handled directly in the page. And this is something that I do not like. I want my business logic to stay somewhere outside. Also infrastructure logic, the JSON management thing, like receiving JSON, parsing JSON and all, it's also blended together with the user interface code and the business logic code. I would also like to separate that part and move it elsewhere. So I like my tiers to be clean. So maybe events could help. If I introduce events and start publishing events from my page rather than just stuffing everything inside, I could solve the problem. So let's take a look at what kind of events we have. We have dynamic events, we have static events. Dynamic, static, and manual. Dynamic static events are events which are invoked automatically. You don't need to do anything. You just say that this code unit is or has an event subscriber. And if you do nothing else, it will just fire. And every time it fires an event, it always fires the new instance of that code unit, and there is no state preserved between separate calls into it. Manual subscriber code unit will not fire any events unless you call bind subscription function. And it will stop firing events the moment you call unbind subscription. So these two functions will change the behavior of that code unit. However, important thing is, every time you fire an event inside of a manually bound code unit, it is the same instance that responds, which means you are able to preserve state, which is very important. If you think of this, if my business logic is going to live in the events somewhere outside of the page, one thing that page could do, and that page is very good at, is retaining state. You know, as long as the user is inside the same page, the state remains in there. However, if you move the business logic out of the page object into a code unit, your state is gone. So if you have dynamic, static code units, then every event that it calls into code unit, you will also have to pass all possible state, which is a bad thing. Why would you be passing all of possible state into something that is intrinsic part of the page object, just separated because of clean design? So personally, I prefer manual events. However, they come at a price. Let's take a look at how we can decouple this thing with events. So I'm going to delete, actually, no, demo 3 is the same JavaScript. It is just going to be different CAL. So let's go into CAL. Here, my CAL looks different now. So I still have a control ready event. However, it doesn't just call start, it also calls bind subscription on this JavaScript code unit. Let's take a look at this guy. So JavaScript code unit. So here I have this initialize method which receives an instance of JavaScript add-in. This is my interface that I've defined in C#. You can, in 2016 and 2017, pass that as a variable out of the page. And now you can talk directly to JavaScript from outside of the page object, from code units. So this is what I do. I create an instance of a code unit, I give my JavaScript interface to it so that it can talk to JavaScript directly, and I bind its events so that when the page fires events, this code unit will respond. So here I have this control event. This is my business logic. So inside of this business logic, I now handle this case and check, okay, which method was called, this one, so what do I need to do? That thing. And that's all. So also, when I close page, I unbind subscription so that my event subscriber doesn't remain alive after page is closed. That would be a bad thing because, you know, you start another page, the same event is fired, and then my dead, actually undead code unit starts responding or keeps responding to things, which would be a bad thing. So that's why I unbind subscription. So let's start this demo 3. It will look exactly the same, so you will not perceive any difference. I will just do something here like that and send to nav. And that's interesting because it does exactly the same thing, just in a different architecture. So when event arrives from NAV, what happens in here is control event is fired, and then it simply calls on control event, which is an integration event. See, I've made an integration event. Microsoft doesn't do that because they are not sure that they will never want to change the signature. I'm pretty sure I will never want to change signature of this one. It only needs this JSON, which contains all the context I need for business logic to execute. Okay, so that's how decoupled page with the control then looks like. There is one problem with that. I haven't demonstrated yet. I will just demonstrate in a second. That's that depending on how you exactly navigate to the page or from the page, this onClose page trigger might not fire. If you do not trust me, then let me just go back to the browser and let me just refresh. I will just click this again. And then I will do Vjekoslav, Babić, send to nav, 1, 2. Okay, I'll refresh once again. Donald Trump, 1, 2, 3. And if I keep going, it will be more and more and more. Every time I refresh, I get a fresh instance subscribed, but my onClose page trigger never fired. Okay, you are looking at the page, not at this. And this is the problem. Why does it happen? Well, honestly, I do not know. But thing is, it does happen. the only situation when it does not happen is if you open the page as a card page from a list page from a role center and then navigate using the navigate button. But if you open the page directly, which you can do, then this behavior will happen. So the end result is that we have multiple subscriber instances. Subscribers remain subscribed. We have no possibility to unsubscribe. And we actually have orphan code unit instances living out there, happily firing events without a page to talk to. That will cause bugs, you can imagine, because JavaScript instance that it attempts to talk to is gone. It's not on screen. So I'm not sure it will crash the session, but it will look ugly anyway. So we need to take care of that. So how do I do that? How do I solve that problem? Well, I will just delete this content of my demo 3, and I will go into demo 4. So I'll copy the content of demo 4, and then let's take a look at JavaScript. Because CAL is still mostly the same. There are subtle changes in there. The most important changes happen in here. So let's take a look at my script now. It's this script. So I have this little part, this little piece of code. What does it do? Here, I subscribe to the onBeforeUnload event of the parent window. This is the event which will fire no matter what you do. So no matter how you navigate away, this JavaScript event will fire. So I capture that event, and so this is how I capture. I assign this function to it. And then I also have to make sure that I do not unload twice, because that could cause issues. So I memorize if I have unloaded it, and if I didn't, then I simply call this close requested event in CAL. So back in my CAL, if I take a look at demo 4, there is close requested. And from here, I finalize. So I've moved some code into this finalize, which means I've unsubscribed from here rather than directly from onClose page. And then I call close page again directly, so that I make sure that the page does go away. And then this page close might again trigger this finalize, and it might again trigger this the same thing. The reason why I have it twice is because if you navigate away using standard behavior of NAV, then it will be quicker to do that. So I just save one extra event unnecessarily. So this is how I do that. And then let me just compile and build this solution here. And the moment it's completed, I will load demo 4 here. Actually, is it demo 4 or? Yeah. And then I will try the same thing. John Doe once. And then I will load it again. And I will do Jane Doe send to nav 1 and only 1. And if I try it again, trust me, it will be 1 and only 1 ever since. So this is how to take care of this problem. Honestly, I believe this is a platform issue. It is probably a bug, and I hope Microsoft fixes this so we don't have to do this ugly workaround. Every year, I present an ugly workaround here, and then next year it gets fixed. Last year, I wasn't able to show how to transfer control-in out of the page into a code unit because that was crashing the client. Now it's fixed. So maybe this gets fixed at a point. I hope so. Still, we have problems. This is still not good enough. The problem is scripts. You've seen that in my control-in, it's now 34 kilobytes, but I want it to be even smaller because I want to eliminate any kind of duplication that I have in the script. What kind of duplication do I have? Well, first of all, this jQuery that I use. Microsoft also uses jQuery. So there is jQuery, downloaded from the internet, loaded into the browser. So browser has it cached locally. And now I want to supply another copy of it. Why? Why not just using the same copy that the browser is already using? That's just one example of why I would want to separate the scripts from my control-in. My control-in, ultimately, I want it to be just infrastructure, so that everything is comes from somewhere else. So the first step that I want to do is reduce script loading and multiplication by loading things only once and reusing the browser cache as much as I can, because this will improve performance, especially at those small devices like phones. And also, I want to optimize any kind of dependencies, scripts, style sheets, images, anything. So let's take a look at how I can take care of this now. So I will just delete demo 4. See how easy it is to change the entire code, just press F6 and everything is deployed to NAV. So if you didn't download that template, now is the time while I'm fumbling here with these small icons on the screen. Do you see the code? Okay. So here's my demo 6. Let me first rebuild demo 6. And then let me take a look at the size of the resulting. Okay, it was 30-something, now it's 2 kilobytes in size. So it doesn't really have much in there. So let's take a look at what it has. It has this style sheet, it has this script here, demo 5 control JS, which now has some more code. Okay? It has this piece of code. Let's take a look at what it does. It retrieves the scripts that are loaded in the parent window, which is the NAV web client. And then it does a for each through them and is looking for jQuery. And when it finds jQuery, it creates a new script element, uses the same URL, and injects it into my iframe where control-edin lives. And then, only after this script is loaded and executed, I fire my ready event in CAL. So exactly the same thing happens, only much faster, with a much smaller control-edin that just takes like a nanosecond to transfer to the wire, much less time to unzip and do everything. So yes, I have already rebuilt it. Let's take a look at my page 6. Page 6 is still exactly the same copy of page 5. So if I run my demo 6, even though, demo 5, I'm at demo 5. I will click this, and it's here. So exact the same behavior from a control-edin which is only 2 kilobytes in size. So what I've done here is I have saved a little time by reusing code that Microsoft has already deployed, so that I don't have to spend extra time on processing that. You know, JavaScript takes a little while to execute, and especially scripts such as jQuery, which are 100 and plus, like 180 kilobytes, I think this specific instance is minified, which means it's quite a lot of code. It needs to compile it every single time. Why would you do that? So just reuse exactly the same source. Browser is smart enough to know if it comes from the same source, it is already compiled. So this is how we optimize both the infrastructure behavior and the performance of this script. So again, it will do exactly the same thing. Behavior has not changed. And if I refresh that and do it twice, it will still be only 1. Okay. So we are nearly there. Not quite. There is a problem. I don't know if anyone of you thought of that the moment I showed how I collect my jQuery. The problem is, this works only in the web browser. Because if I go into the RTC client, there is no parent window. My iframe is the only thing there is. Actually, of course, there is a browser window on top of that, but there is no jQuery loaded into it. So I need to put everything into the script that I want to have inside of my frame. So if I try to run this page from the Windows client, let's try that. This is page 5. I run that. What? Okay. This was sleeping this morning, unlike me. So that's my page, nothing in there. Because it didn't load jQuery. It didn't have anywhere to load it from, and it's not a part of my control-edin. So I have to handle that somehow. So what am I going to do here? What I want to do now is provide a different way of loading scripts and other kinds of dependencies. As I said, I do not want them to be a part of my controller then, because that is not the most efficient thing. But obviously, I cannot just reuse them from the browser because the browser might not even be there. So I have to handle that through my infrastructure code. So I will have to create a framework for loading those dependencies. And welcome the RequireAL guy. Who knows of RequireJS? Okay, 2 people, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, this is normal because why would a CL developer be concerned with RequireJS? It's a module loader. So if you run some JavaScript in the browser, in the app, on Node.js, or like if you want in Visual Studio Code, then RequireJS takes care of loading dependencies. So just say at the beginning or anywhere inside of your JavaScript, I require jQuery, and then it loads jQuery. You don't need to know where from, it just loads it. It knows where it is. So I was thinking, why not doing RequireAL? So when I need a script inside of my controller, then I cannot, unfortunately, use RequireJS, or perhaps I could, I just didn't push hard enough. So I came up with this RequireAL. So inside of my JavaScript, I say I require this, or I require that, and then it collects it in the most efficient way that it can be. So how would it do? First, it would take a look at the web client. If it's in the web client, it would just collect the script from the top window if it can. If it cannot find it there, then it would fall back and fire an event in the backend, in CL, and ask CL, okay, can you supply this script to me? And then CL might supply it because it might have it in the setup table that I will show, or CL can say, sorry, I don't know of this script. And then third thing happens is it just downloads it from internet. So you get your script in the most efficient way, always. It's just that sometimes it will be a little bit slower because it's a different kind of client that it cannot handle. So we keep our controller as lean as possible. We load our scripts in the most efficient way as possible. We have a fallback mechanism so that we can make sure that script is always loaded. And we can still make changes to the behavior of JavaScript and change anything without ever having to worry about upgrading the existing framework, existing interface, or the footprint that the interface has on the CAL code. So let's take a look at RequireAL. I will delete these objects from demo 5. And I will go to demo 6. So we'll copy them here. So let's take a look. Inside here, I'm not sure what's exactly happening, but I might, apparently my demo files are not in the shape I hope them to be, so I might, at the end of this demo, do a little fumbling. Maybe it doesn't succeed. So I usually rehearse all my demos, but this is probably going to be one that might fail. But for now, let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at this RequireAL script. So there is this big function at the beginning. I will just collapse it to start with, and here I have 2 blocks. I have a config block. Of course, they do not have to sit together. This is just so it is easier for you to see what happens and how it works. Here I have this config block where I define that I have 2 objects, 2 scripts that I might need. I may define Angular or whatever else like Knockout.js or whatever. And then if any script that will be loaded through my framework ever needs it, then RequireAL will know how to collect that. So I have, each of them is named, and it has the regular expression pattern by which JavaScript will attempt to find it in the scripts that are loaded in the parent window. If that fails, it will ask NAV for jQuery script from the setup. And if that fails, then it will simply load this from this URL. So jQuery will apparently be loaded from the URL. And this one will not, jQuery UI. I don't have it at the URL because jQuery UI is something that you need to configure according to your specific needs. Otherwise, it's just too big to download. So I don't have a URL. I will have to have it inside of my NAV. Let's go back to NAV and let's take a look at this setup. So I will go to my pages, and there is this controlled in resources. So here, when I run this, I see that I have some JavaScripts, some images, and that apparently I have some configuration. There is this jQuery UI here, which I can load and run as instead of my jQuery, which would normally be embedded. Also, yeah, I don't have jQuery apparently here, so it means it will always fall back to downloading it from the internet. That's intentional, so that you can see that even though I don't have it in the setup, and even though I might not be able to access it through the parent browser, I will still be able to use it. So this is my page 6, and let me rebuild it here. Of course, here I have also said to my framework that I want to use both of them. So again, this does not need to be here. It can be somewhere else, wherever it makes most sense for you to put it. So I will just run it from there. So let's load demo 6. Ooh, what do you know? There's the chess. So let's try to play chess with NAV. Let's see if actually it can detect stupid mistakes. Oh. Okay, I'm not going to embarrass myself in front of you. But this is something that has happened because I have decided to show a different demo for a change. I've been showing this click me and send me. So this is a different kind of thing, like just to show that you can put whatever you want inside of your page. So how did this get loaded? Let's take a look. So apart from having this RequireJS, I also have this new event that I've created, which is called onRequestUI. So all of my code units that I will be able to now abstract my business logic into, and this page 6006 accidentally works with the code unit 6006. If I go into code unit 6006, I will see that in there I have some methods that send scripts and send styles and send images and send HTML, and they respond to require event to send something else if needed. And here I have some functionality. My control event is still here, and I even have some style sheets embedded into the code. I have some HTML embedded in the code. So I can have it in the code, I can have it in the setup table, whichever way I want to. And then this request UI event, it will be received as a subscriber here, and then it will just get HTML from this code, pass it onto the page, get JavaScript, get images, get style sheets, and pass all of that into the front end. And front end will then execute that. And even though I don't have all of the dependencies loaded, if I run this inside of my Windows client, it also runs pretty well. So it is also fairly, yeah, it doesn't make me doesn't let me be stupider than I already am. So, okay, this is how to separate those concerns of UI, of scripts, of classes, style sheets even further than we have done so far. But this is still not good enough. So far, we have managed to get to a fairly lean state of the solution. We have a very lean, very thin, 2 kilobytes thin, controller in, which can handle all scripts, which can handle all style sheets dynamically as needed. And we'll load them in the most efficient way, and it also separates the business logic from the UI. So far, so good. However, this is not all. So we are again at the part 1, apparently. That's copy-paste bad habit. So I've changed the title, I just forgot to change the number. So this is part 2, optimizing backend. So JavaScript is as optimal as it can possibly get. Perhaps you will, when you download these things from my blog, you will find more ways to optimize that, and that's fair. I will now go and try to optimize another thing because I have only 45 minutes left and quite a lot of work to do. What is the problem? Why do I want to keep optimizing? Well, code is still tightly bound. There is still, logic is removed from pages as much as possible. But UI logic, the infrastructure logic, and business logic are still tightly bound inside of that code unit. If you remember this chess code unit, there was all sort of crap inside. There was HTML, there was responses to events, there was UI events, there were click events, all stuff in one code unit, just dumped. Yeah, we don't have it in the page, good job, but we have it in another pile, which is equally as ugly. And you know, if you ask me, if you have your code in piles, it's better to have them in one pile rather than two piles. So if you want to separate, then separate the correct way, not this way. So let me fix that. Apparently, I will have to apply some design patterns here. So far, this was no design patterns, and I don't know if you hate the term design pattern. I don't, but I will have to introduce a few. Let's talk a little bit about polymorphism. So you know what polymorphism is. Yeah, it's when a dolphin jumps and you see it as a cow. That's when an object can change shapes at runtime and one moment be something and one moment be something else. Polymorphism is an extremely important concept in object-oriented development, and not just object-oriented development, because it allows something that's called loose coupling. And sad truth about polymorphism in CAL is that there is no such thing as polymorphism in CAL. So we are kind of in front of a wall. So let's try to see what we can do. There are many polymorphic patterns, just not in CAL. So if you take a look at Java, at C#, at Python, Ruby, whatever, you will see a dozen, a dime of polymorphic patterns which attempt to solve the same problem in a slightly different way, or maybe a variation of a problem in a different way. When we talk about most common, or gang of 4 design patterns, then we have these 5: factory, service locator, dependency injection strategy, etc. So all of these are called inversion of control because they do something very, very nice. They help us really decouple our code, separate concerns as much as possible. How does inversion of control approach the problem? Let's think of this. Imagine that you have some consumer object that uses a dependency, which means it uses another object which has logic which is not intrinsically this object's logic. So let's talk about event logging. Imagine that consumer object is sales order page and dependency 1 is event logging. So namely, you are logging events into a file. So when you release a sales order, there is a flag in the file which says this user at that moment has released. And when you reopen, it says another line, and this user at that time has reopened. So this is how we would normally write it in CL. We would put event logging into one code unit, then reference it from the sales order page, or maybe sales order release code unit, but we would still have a tight link between the consumer and the dependency. And then what happens, you decide to change this dependency with SQL Server logging. So what do you need to do? You need to go and recompile. So you change the link. You change the consumer to use another dependency. But what happens with this one? It loses the link, so it forgets about it. What if you want to use this one or that one? Well, then you would have to go inside and write if this, then that, and it becomes a very ugly piece of code. So, inversion of control approaches the problem like this. Obviously, this is a bad practice. So how does inversion of control? It just inverts it. So dependencies work in the opposite direction. And they're not really dependency, they are loosely bound. So we have a consumer object which needs a dependency, so it needs a behavior. And then it has some kind of dependency resolver, let's say a factory. And it says to the factory, I need an event logger. And it doesn't care if it's a file system or Windows event log or it's SQL Server or some kind of web service or Twitter or whatever. It just says, give me an event logger. And then this dependency resolver, based on some setup or whatever, makes a decision and says, okay, here's your Twitter event logger. And then my consumer object consumes whichever dependency came into it without having to know what exactly it does. All that my sales order page needs to know is that I can log events with this thing. How exactly? Not my concern. Okay? So that's inversion of control. It solves this problem of tightly coupling dependencies. What happened? I was clicking too far. There is one pattern in particular in CEL which seems to solve that problem. If you take a look at the diagram, it is almost identical. So here we have a consumer object. Since it's extremely difficult to have real dependency injection or inversion of control or factory or any kind of similar pattern inside of CEL, we have to call events in place. So instead of consumer object knowing, or actually just asking this dependency resolver for a dependency, it fires an event. It says, I need this logging thing to happen. Okay? And then this facade, which sits in between, which has this event log method, it simply fires an event and then allows any of the subscribers to subscribe to it. So if you want to have, let's say, Twitter logging, then this handle facade will fire Twitter logging. If you need file system logging, it will fire file system logging. How does it work? It has two components. It has the publisher component, which is the interface. So if I need to log an event, I call the publisher. I say, I want to log an event. And I don't care how exactly. It's what publisher also doesn't care. So publisher finds the subscriber code unit, and then it calls the event, and then at the end, it makes sure that the event was handled. At the same time, subscriber checks if the event was already handled, am I the right subscriber to handle that? And if these checks pass, then I go on and execute the logic and then set the handled parameter to true so that publisher knows that it was successfully executed. This is what it looks like in the code. So we have this piece of code where I have log event. This is my interface. Here I first retrieve a handler based on some kind of setup, and then I call on log event, and then make sure that event was handled. If not handled, then error. Good. And then I have two subscribers. Both of them do this check at the beginning. They check if this is an event for me. If so, was this event already handled? If not, then it executes the logic. Otherwise, it goes out. And at the end, it sets handle to true and all hunky-dory. But it's not really hunky-dory. There are things which are not that good. First, subscriber identification. It is handled at two places. So my interface needs to be aware of possible subscribers. This is not a bad thing. Anyhow, any inversion of control has to be aware of possible dependencies. So this is not such a big problem, but this is duplicated. See, inside of my event handler, I also have to do this check. And this is a failure point. I may make a mistake there. The second problem is there can be multiple active subscribers. Nobody can prevent me to subscribe to the same event without following the rules of the infrastructure. Without checking, is this event for me? I don't care. Was it handled? Don't give up, And I also do not set handled, so I just want to confuse the framework. So that's, a gentleman's agreement pattern, if you ask me. So then cross-call state preservation. In the handle pattern, you have to have static code units. So you will have problems with state preservation. Every call will just, go into a new instance. Then infrastructure separation. What you see in all of them is this. You have infrastructure code, then some business logic, then again some infrastructure code, all in the same place. Personally, I dislike that. So this is not the best thing. And then infrastructure fragility. As I said, who prevents me to do things like that? Like I make a wrong check, or I forget to set handle to true, and I break the whole thing, or like inject some malicious code or whatever. So let's think of how to handle those pitfalls. Obviously, I will have to do something with manual subscribers. But the moment I introduce manual subscribers, I complicate things. You will see why exactly. However, if I manage to put manual subscribers in the game, then I solve these two problems. If I have manual subscribers, then since my interface subscribes manually each of possible event handlers, then at least it can make sure that there are no multiple subscribers, and it also can make sure that there is cross-call state preservation, so that whenever an event fires, it is in the same instance which was subscribed, which may be important depending on what this logic is that you're performing. There is another event pattern which can help here. This is called discovery event pattern. If you don't know of this, then follow this link and learn about it. It has been put to use in 2016 and also 2017 even more. It is a standard pattern that Microsoft is applying, and I will also demonstrate how you can apply it in a very similar way. So what is event discovery pattern? This is a pattern which is in charge of finding what kind of things exist in the system. So you can use it for whatever you want. Here I'm using it for identifying interfaces and for identifying possible dependencies to handle those interfaces. How does it work? First, we have a discoverer, some entity in charge of finding out who is out there. Like, for example, who can handle event logging? So it fires a discovery event and says, please identify yourselves. And then subscribers who subscribe to event logging will say, me and me and me, and will identify themselves in some way so that discoverer knows who they are. Okay? And then we have a list of discovered modules. And that's all. So it doesn't do much more. It just identifies things for us. But it's extremely powerful, even though it looks simple because it doesn't do anything. It just gets the list of things that are there. We can put it to very, very good use, as you will also see in standard code how Microsoft does it. So let's see this discovery event pattern. I've said that I have things called interfaces. Think of interfaces, if you know C# and you know what an interface is, this is similar here. I have interface code units. They do have some business logic inside because we don't really have interface code units in CAL, but they perform or achieve exactly the same thing. So let's take a look at these interfaces. Here I have one page interface setup. Apparently, I will have also interface setup table. What I want to make sure is that this table is empty. So I run it, it's empty. And then I want to see what kind of interfaces I have, which means what kind of possible behaviors that somebody might need in the application. So I will run my page. And when I run the page, oh, there are 4. So there is address formatter, there is currency exchange, there is event logging, and there is TechDays 2016 demo interface. What do you know? So they came from somewhere. Where did they come from? Well, let's take a look. What happens in this page? Because if I go now into my table and run the table will have some values inside. Well, let me delete that. I really do not want them to be here. Let me go back to the page. So let's take a look at the page. At the beginning of the page fires this onRegister interface. What is this onRegister interface? It is an event on the table called interface setup. So when this event fires, let's take a look at the signature. It says it's interface setup record. So it passes this table as itself to whoever cares to subscribe itself or actually identify itself. Then let's take a look at an interface. Interface is a code unit. So I've said I have a currency exchanger, formatter, Twitter, something or other, or whatever. Let's take a look. I have this. Let me start with this event log interface. So I go there. The interface has a method, event log. It has an event, onLog event, and it has, okay, it does some subscription for whatever reason. It doesn't really matter at this stage, but it has this onRegister interface. So it subscribes to this discovery event and tells to the system, here I am. I'm inside. I can handle event logging. Or if I go into address formatter interface, it is very similar. It has less business logic, and it also registers itself. So if you have a functionality, like a new functionality that you want to introduce into the application, just the way I have introduced this control add-in interface, which is in fact TechDays demo interface, you can just create a new code unit which subscribes to this known event, and suddenly your functionality is available to whoever needs to call into it. So this is how a discovery event works. Let's go back into this page. So interface setup. I run this interface setup. Let's edit this list and let's try to configure this. For each interface, it asks me which module handles it. So I look up here, I have no modules. For event logging, I have this Windows event log. Let me use Windows event log. And then when I apologize, let me use Windows file system event log. When this setting is done, here I can click setup and then I can configure this module. Okay? I can specify where's the path to which I want to log events. What happened here? You know what happened? Another discovery event. So when I looked up from here, another discovery event fired, which asked, okay, where are the modules which can handle this interface? So here I have, for event logging, I have 3 modules. I can log it to whatever way I want. Or for my Tech Days 2016 demo, let's take a look. I have 2 modules. I have Twitter demo and I have this Garbo chess demo that I constructed from some public open source libraries. So this is how discovery event works. It fires an event, it asks who's there, and then either stores it permanently or temporarily and allows you to configure the behavior of the application in a loosely coupled way. You can imagine that now that I have this interface set up, my infrastructure can use this setup to identify which module will respond when I need to log events or which module will respond when I run my Tech Days demo next time. Okay? So let's go and let's take a look at how it responds to these event logs. So I will go into my role-tailored client, into sales orders, and then I will find a sales order which is released, like this one, and then I will go to this file, this temporary location. I will delete this log file from here. Let me move it over there and let me reopen. So when I reopen, there is my log here which says this sales order has just been reopened. I will release it and this updates with sales order has just been released. Good. I don't need this guy anymore. Let me close this page and then let me reconfigure my interface. Let me say that instead of file system event logger, I actually want to have Twitter event log. Okay? There is some setup behind Twitter, which is a different page. This is what my Twitter module said. This is page that you use to configure me. So every module can publish that using the same discovery event pattern. And here I have some Twitter configuration, how to log into Twitter. And I will close this page, go back, and then open the same. Actually, let me use another one. Where's the fun if I always demo from exactly the same? So I will reopen that. And then I will go to my Twitter page. So here I will refresh my tweets. And it says sales order has just been reopened. So I will release it. And when I refresh this page, it will post another tweet. So I didn't even have to close the application, exit, do anything, whatever. Just live, I have loosely bound one other module just by changing a piece of configuration. So this is how discovery event works. So that's the discovery event pattern. Extremely, extremely powerful. So whoever tells you that this is not the real pattern has no clue what they're talking about. This is as good as a pattern as patterns get. So after discovery event, this is what we have. We have solved subscriber identification because right now nobody can cheat me anymore that you are who you tell you are. Because I have identified you. I know that you exist and I know how to call you specifically. So that's how we have solved the biggest problem of handle pattern. We have more to go. So here I propose my own pattern, which I called module binder pattern. So what I want to do here is take care of these 2 remaining blocks. Infrastructure separation, because I really love to have clean code, and infrastructure fragility. I want to make sure that nobody can really mess up with my behavior. So I combine these 2 patterns. I combine discovery pattern and handle pattern. in such a way that I achieve logic and infrastructure separation so that my business logic lives in the business logic code unit and infrastructure lives completely in the infrastructure part of the system or the setup. And that way you have very, very clean solution that you can also apply to JavaScript, as we will see. So far, this part is not about JavaScript, it's just generally architecture. What does this module binder pattern look like? Like this. So if it looks like this to you, it's not accidental. So it seems to be a lot of components in there that do this or that. But in fact, this is what it is. It has 4 individual large blocks of code. This consumer is the smallest one. You can just ignore it. This is my sales order page that consumes this functionality. My sales order page talks to the interface. This is, remember that those interfaces that I had, like event logger, address formatter, whatever. So my page is aware of those. And it doesn't have to be tightly aware. It can be aware through events and through extensions. I can actually create a code unit, which is an extension which is aware of my interface and which now binds the page to be able to talk to the interface. So it's loosely coupled. So this interface publishes the business logic event. So when I need to log something, I call interface, and interface fires on event log to whomever wants to listen. However, my consumer does one more thing before it starts consuming events. It talks to infrastructure, and it says, please load this module for me. So if I've said that for event logging, I want to use Twitter, at this stage, my sales order page talks to the infrastructure and says, please load whichever module is responsible for event logging interface. And infrastructure goes into the setup and checks who is responsible for event logging, Twitter. And then it binds, it calls bind subscription on the Twitter code unit. So that it is the only code unit that actually responds to events. Okay? And then, when I call this onLog event, my interface fires the event, the module which was bound manually using bind subscription responds and performs its logic. And that's all. That's all there is to it. So this is what interface looks like. Very simple thing. Just one simple method and one simple event. So you are kind of tightly bound to the method. You say like log the event. But that's where it ends. From that moment, everything is loosely coupled. And this is how all loose coupled patterns, there has to be tight binding at some position. Like you need to know what you are calling. So when you fire this event, what happens is that the module kicks in. Module is a 2 code unit block. It's not 1 code unit anymore because it cannot be. It has 1 code unit which handles infrastructure and 1 code unit which handles business logic. So how does it handle that? Like this. This is the business logic code unit. It just has an event subscriber. So it has this event subscriber log event, and it performs, in this example, the Windows file system event logging. This is the binder. This is infrastructure part. The infrastructure part finds the module and runs bind subscription on that module, and when you unbind the module, then you unbind subscription. So how did I bind those? How did I actually invoke module binder from my code? I will show all of this, or actually not exactly all, but most. So here I have this event log customization code unit. This is just full of events. So here, when I open sales order card, I bind my interface. And when I close the sales order card, I unbind the interface. So that's how I bind. I say like, okay, please bind for me whichever code unit is in charge for handling event logging, or whichever code unit is in charge of handling my TechDays demo. So this is how I bind to this binder. So it binds and unbinds modules. It discovers modules for me, which modules exist for a specific interface. And we have one more component, which is Module Manager, which handles discovery of interfaces and modules. So it's kind of on top of everything. We will see a little more of that. We still have some challenges. Still, there are certain things which do not work just as expected. So first, call multiplication. it can still happen that we have call multiplication. It can still happen that we have explicit subscriptions. Like, all infrastructure aside, if I follow the gentleman agreement that I have in place, I can still create a code unit which statically subscribes to event log. And anytime that there is an event log, my code unit also fires. Nobody knows that, right? How do you know? You don't. So that's a problem. Then I can have these rogue subscribers just jumping in, subscribing to whichever event just to mess up with the system or just to steal some information or whatever. Or I can still have single subscribers. So let's take a look at the solution to these challenges. First, I have invoked the help of event subscription virtual table. This is a virtual table which keeps on the NST in memory the list of all publishers and all subscribers. And it's extremely fast because that's exactly the same thing that NST is using when choosing whom to invoke when an event fires. So you can use this virtual table to actually check, to perform two very important checks. First is you can verify that for your module, there are only manual subscribers. And if there are not manual subscribers, actually if there are subscribers which are not manual, you can throw an error and say, sorry, I do not let you in. And that will just prevent you from messing up with the entire pattern. Because nobody will be able to just put their code unit which subscribes to your event. Because if it's manual, if it's static, it will be rejected by this event here. And, sorry, not event, but function. And if you want to subscribe that to actually be legitimately responding to events, then what do you need to do? You have to create a module and you have to have the user configure that module to respond to that specific event. So it's pretty safe. And then you have another one. You actually verify that there are active subscribers before calling. With this, you mitigate this last one, that there is only a single subscriber, okay? So before you make the call to event log, you again check into the event subscriber table to verify that there is one and only one, or in this example, more than one, because I've just decided to allow more subscribers for a specific kind of event. But here you can do checks whichever you want, whichever makes sense for your business logic. If it's more, then you can check for more. If it's only one, you can check for exactly one subscriber and see if there are or there are not. So this is the solution, and with that, we have actually handled all of the problems. So with the module binder pattern in place, we actually solve the entire infrastructure and UI and business logic separation. So let's take a look at this binder pattern inside. How did all these Twitter and event log things happen? So here I will go into event log binder Twitter. Inside here, I have the bind module subscriber, which checks if the module name that my infrastructure is asking for matches my name, or if interface name is different, then I just go out. What does it mean? Since this is statically subscribed, all of these will always fire. And this is the tiny layer on top of everything, which is still kind of gentleman's agreement, because this is the entry point. If you want to inject something of yours, you could do it theoretically here. But since the system is resilient on other ends, it will not break it. So you could attempt, but it would fail. So here I do two checks. First I check, is this module handling this interface? Which means if I'm loading TechDays demo interface, and here I have Twitter event logger module responding, it will just go out because it's not for the same interface. But when the system asks, okay, who is handling event logging? Then this guy will check, okay, this is event logging, that's me. But is this also loading Twitter event log or SQL Server event log? Then it will do another check, and depending on what it finds, it will either exit or clear the instance of the business logic. This is this module thing. Okay? And then it will bind its subscription. Since this guy is single instance, it can retain state. Okay? There is a way, and I will blog about that, it would just be too complicated for this session, how to make it multi-instance still, to allow you to have multiple subscribers at the same time. The reason why I'm not showing it would just be acrobacy. It wouldn't help anything because inside web client, you are one page only thing. So there are very few and far between situations that you would actually want to have multiple subscribers to the same interface at the same time. That's very unlikely. But still, it is possible. So here I bind subscription, and then I specify that, yes, subscription is bound, and that's all. When I close the page, for example, the sales order page, I'm unbinding the interface. So what I, again, do the same check. I check, is this for me? If yes, then I check, am I bound actually or not? Because it can be that I'm not actually bound. So then I unbind subscription from this module, and I clear the variable once again and set this bound to false. That's all that my infrastructure part of logic does. And then let's take a look at event log Twitter business logic. That's it. So it subscribes to event, log event, and then it checks some Twitter setup to see is Twitter actually configured. If it is, it calls Twitter API. It creates an instance of this class and then just calls tweet method by passing the context into it to perform the actual. And there are two helper functions which just do some formatting to help me with that. And then if I take a look at this customization here, I can see that I have actually, when sales order page was opened, I have bound the interface, and when the page was closed, I have unbound the interface, and I've done that for sales order list and sales orders. And then here in sales order released event, I have actually called, I've created event arguments because, again, I'm using another pattern here, arguments table pattern. And then I'm populating this event arguments, and then I'm logging them into event logger, whoever that is, Twitter, file system, whatever. And that's it. And then when it's reopened, exactly the same thing. And here's my helper that just creates my arguments table for me so that I can log that. Let's take a look at that in another example, which is my demo example here. So I'm going to my Tech Days 2016. So here, since I have a specific page which runs my demo, I'm doing this module binding inside of the page. So here I will actually have a load module method where I will first check if this was already initialized, because it all depends on events which are firing first. Then I just then I initialize, or if I have already been initialized, I just go on. And then I call this bind interface, and I'm binding this Tech Days 2016 demo interface, whatever that is. So that's just something that my control add-in needs at this stage. And then again, when the page closes, there is this finalize method, which is safe because of this require close requested. It actually finalizes, it unbinds the interface so that it doesn't respond to events anymore. It deinitializes it. It also unbinds this JavaScript code unit, which was responding to JavaScript user interface things, which are not business logic, they are just user interface things. So I've separated user interface into separate code unit, business logic into separate code unit, and infrastructure into separate code unit. And then everything else happens just like it happened earlier. So if I take a look at the configuration, interface setup, right now it says that I have this Garbo chess that's handling my my business logic. So let me run this from the Windows client. There it is, so it actually works. Let me not play chess, even though I have 11 more minutes, just enough time for me to lose badly. And if I go into this interface setup and change this into Twitter and close this, and then I can run it from here. There is some Twitter, or I can run it from here. Which one do you want me to use so that you can tell me that I didn't cheat? This one? Okay, so I've just attended the most amazing session ever. Okay, let's check. I bet it will be here. There it is. So if you do not retweet this, every single last one of you, I will be very annoyed. Come on, go on. I know you've been tweeting earlier, so what's stopping you now? Okay, so that's the module binder pattern in action with control add-ins, resulting in very, very lean control add-in, very lean business logic code units, very lean infrastructure code units, everyone handling just whatever they need to be concerned with. And finally, oh yeah, I have jumped a little bit ahead, sorry. I've explained that slide earlier, so I will just not re-explain the same thing. What the last thing that I want to give to you is, if I didn't lose you so far, here's where I lose you. Because right now I'm going to do something so crazy that you will either go like, this guy is an idiot, or you will say like, wow. Yeah, I know that you knew. So, when events came along, I had a chat with a colleague who said, we should not be subscribing to our own events from within our own application. It makes no sense. And I strongly disagree to that. And of course, you do want to subscribe to your own events. I've just shown why. And Microsoft does that, and you probably do that as well. There's a million reasons why you would want to do that. However, what I did is I wrote a code unit which publishes an event, and then it subscribes itself to its own event. How do you like that? Do you think it's crazy? Let me see who actually thinks it's crazy. Because when whoever I told it was like, wow, you are nuts. So, okay, let me explain why I'm doing that. Think of this. I have separated all concerns all over the place. So there are code units at work which do not necessarily know of my control add-in. For me, to be able to talk to JavaScript, whenever I need to pass something into JavaScript, I need to be able to get access to that instance that I have originally passed from my page into my infrastructure code unit, or actually UI infrastructure code unit, JavaScript manager code unit. So this code unit is now an interface for doing the talk to the web client. However, since there are those modules that are loaded all over the place, they do not necessarily know of this instance. So my page has an instance of this code unit which holds an instance of my control add-in. But my module, which responds to events, which needs to talk to control add-in, does not have an instance of this code unit available, because it does not even know which code unit that is or might be. So, to avoid writing a zillion control add-ins, if this then that, or switch or whatever, what I've done is that this code unit, which is in charge of talking to the control add-in, let's take a look at it. It's this one, JavaScript gateway. It actually has a method, for example, this send script, when I want to send a script from my setup into the JavaScript. So what does it do? It sets this JSON something or other and then calls this method call. And this method call checks if my JavaScript is null. This JavaScript, that's actually, if you take a look at this, that's my add-in, my control add-in, my interface class, type. So I check if this is available. It should be available because initialize has received it. And this is the instance that holds it. So as long as I'm talking to this instance which holds this reference, all is fine. However, my page knows of this instance. And this instance knows of that instance. But nobody else does. Especially my module does not. Or any other module that might want to talk to my control add-in. Maybe a table trigger somewhere would want to talk to it. I would hate that, but still. Anybody might want to talk to this control add-in. And they don't hold the reference. So they cannot call send script or show dialog. I had it, I deleted it, for stupid me. So if you want to talk to JavaScript, you have a whole, because you call this send script on an instance which actually doesn't hold the reference. Then this instance goes to method call. This method call checks, do I know of reference of JavaScript controller in? No. So what do? I fire an event on this code unit. Okay? This is the onGetJavaScript event. And guess what? This getJavaScript is a function, event subscriber, on the same code unit, which responds to that event. And since I have manually bound this infrastructure code unit to events, there will be only one of them alive. And that will be the one that holds the reference. So since that one responds to event, it passes the reference out as by reference variable, so that after that, my code, which was called from whoever knows where, has the same reference to the controller then that the original instance of the code unit has. So this is, I don't know if we should call it pattern or whatever, but this can always help you obtain the state of any code unit from within another instance of the same kind of code unit for whichever other purpose you need that. Because this is something that people often had problems with in earlier versions before we had events. So if you ever had a situation that you had a code unit which inside of itself had a variable of the code unit of the same type, then this is exactly the same situation, just with events. So do you still think I'm a nutcase because I did this, or is this a valid thing to do? So, yeah, that's, I don't know what this slide means, so that's all I have to show. Thank you very much. I hope this was worth the applause. Thank you.